Good evening to all of you, and thank you also for being for attending this webinar. We are lucky to have this webinar with Ana Maria Simundic, who is the chair of the EFLM working group on preanalytical phase. This is important because Ana Maria has been chairing this working group from the beginning, around 6 years ago, and she has been a driving force for this preanalytical phase in the European Federation, and we may say all around Europe. As you well know, preanalytical phase is or was, now it is less than in the past, one of those areas that was not interesting for people that work in the lab. We were all too much centered in the analytical aspects. And with certain players, we now give some more importance and some more relevance to this preanalytical phase. Ana Maria has been publishing a lot also on these aspects, and she is also well known for taking part and for her presence in lots of laboratory medicine aspects. She has been engaged in the executive board of EFLM as secretary, and she is now the president-elect of EFLM beginning January next year. She is also the president of the Croatian Society of Medical Biochemists, present president, and she has been editor-in-chief of Biochemia Medica, a scientific journal that gives relevance to this preanalytical phase area, and just started a new set of papers on preanalytical cases that is interesting and should be of much interest to all of us that are engaged in this area. So without any more details or waste of time, I will give Ana Maria the floor in this webinar, and we will listen to our presentation. And I ask you to begin as soon as you think is important, posting your questions in the chat area, and we will try to manage them as if we were in a regular lecture in a conference room. Thank you, Ana Maria. Please, it's your turn.
Thank you, Tiago, for this kind introduction. It's so nice to see so many people that I'm familiar with all around Europe. I have, as Tiago said, I'm chairing this working group now for 6 years, and it has been an immense privilege to me and a huge fun. Hopefully not only for me, but also for all the members of the working group. And I have so much to tell you about the things that we did in the past, and about even more so about the things that we plan to do in the future. So I better start. So the lecture is going to be about harmonization of preanalytical phase in Europe, and what have we done to contribute to this harmonization. So imagine a world where a patient can walk into every lab on Earth and get almost the same test results. This, of course, we all know that. This is not possible. This cannot be possible unless all procedures are reliable and reproducible throughout the total testing process. So not only within the analytical phase, but also in the pre- and post-analytical phase. Now the question is, are preanalytical practices comparable? Are they really reproducible between countries? Are they comparable even between continents, between laboratories, or even between individuals? Well, unfortunately, we know they're not, or at least they're not to a maximum degree, and we know that from a number of original reports And some of them are also from the reports that we did from our earlier studies, like for example this one that we did in 2013. With this paper we have provided evidence about the large heterogeneity in the way people take blood in Europe. People are taking blood in Europe in very different ways. It has been done by different people, different professionals, in some countries by nurses, in some countries by laboratory technicians, in some countries even by medical doctors. All these different professions have different level of knowledge, different level of competence, education, and lifelong training. We also know that the compliance with existing CLSI guidelines is unacceptably low. We know that from another recent study that we did, which is the observational study on compliance of blood sampling procedures with the CLSI guidelines. We did it in 12 European countries, and we've been able to demonstrate that the compliance is very low, unsatisfactory, and we've also been able to demonstrate that the most critical steps, where I would dare to say also the most important steps, patient identification and tube labeling. So these were the two very critical steps in the blood sampling procedure. And we of course know that non-compliance leads to errors. And those errors, the preanalytical errors, always lead to harm, at least to some degree, to harm to the patient. They cause unnecessary cost. They may lead to incorrect test results, unnecessary delays, and lead eventually to diagnostic errors. What is the solution to that? Well, solution is, of course, we all know that, standardization of all procedures within the total testing process. So not only within the analytical steps, I'd like to repeat it and emphasize it once again, not only within the analytical phase, but also around or outside the laboratory in the pre-analytical phase, post-analytical phase. And standardization actually means to develop guidelines, to implement them, and to use them commonly and repeatedly. And only if we do it, if we standardize all our procedures, we will be able to achieve optimum degree of uniformity. So standardization throughout the total testing process should be imperative. So the scope of harmonization should of course include all aspects of the total testing process, as I said, and only if we do it like this, laboratory tests performed by different laboratories at different times on the same sample and same specimen will be comparable. Now, what is the role of EFLM working group for preanalytical phase in this harmonization? And what have we done so far? And in the remaining of this lecture, I'd like to share with you the activities and projects that we did so far, and some of the projects that we are planning, that we are currently doing, or that we plan to do. So to underline the importance of the proper identification procedure, which we have found out to be one of the most critical steps within the blood sampling procedure, we have published a position paper on patient identification and tube labeling. And with this paper, we actually called for harmonization of this very important procedure. Just to make it very brief, we propose that a patient identification is done by with a minimum of 2 and preferably 3 unique identifiers, that regardless of whether you do it before or after the blood sampling, you should always do it in the presence of the patient. And we suggest that barcoded labels are used whenever possible. We also have some recommendations for healthcare institutions, and this is, we recommend that healthcare institutions should have 0 tolerance to patient identification errors, that healthcare institutions should have a policy and written standard operating procedure for patient and sample identification. We also recommend that there should be a system of continuous education of all professions involved in phlebotomy, and as well as a system in place to continuously monitor and reduce the identification error frequency in every healthcare institution. For EFLM member societies, we recommend that they adopt these recommendations, that they widely implement them among healthcare institutions at their national level. To underline the importance of the proper definition of the fasting state, we have published this paper about the standardization of collection requirements for fasting samples. With this paper, just again to make it very brief, we actually propose a standardized definition of what we believe is the best definition for the fasting state. So, what is a fasting state? Well, fasting state is the state where you do the blood drawing between 7 and 9 after 12 hours of fasting. Throughout this fasting state, water consumption is permitted. However, alcohol is not allowed for 24 hours before the blood sampling. And in the morning, when the blood is drawn, or immediately before the blood is going to be drawn, patients should not smoke cigarette and drink coffee or caffeine-containing drinks. Again, we recommend, with this recommendation, we call for harmonization, we call national societies, we call individual laboratories and every professional, healthcare professional to implement this recommendation. So with this document, we encourage professional association to support standardized recommendation for fasting. We call laboratories to adopt this definition of fasting, to have a policy. Again, it's very important to define a policy for sample acceptance criteria. So what if a patient comes and is not properly prepared? What will you do? And how will you address this? And we also recommend that this definition of the fasting state is used whenever scientific papers are published. We have also produced a number of papers addressing the venous blood sampling procedure and different steps, and I cannot, due to the time limitation, go into details, so I will just briefly mention that we have also published a paper about the order of blood draw. With this paper, we support the order of blood draw. We recommend that order of blood draw is always respected whenever the blood is drawn, venous blood sampling is done. And the blood, the order of draw is as it is stated here. The blood culture tube, if the blood culture is sampled, then coagulation tube, serum tube with or without clot activator, heparin tubes, EDTA tube, then tubes with glycolytic inhibitors, and then other tubes as well. We have also published a paper, and I'm sorry, but I don't have a time to go into details, but just for those of you who are interested, there is a paper with which we have tried to define a protocol for local validation of blood collection tubes in clinical laboratories for all laboratories which are in need to validate the tubes, to do the technical validation of the tubes. There is a paper which you can use to do the local validation of blood collection tubes. And one paper that we have recently published that also relates to the blood sampling and the tubes used during the blood sampling is the paper that it's actually a systematic overview or systematic review, I can say, about the effect of different tube additives on blood glucose measurement. And this paper has been accepted for publication in September. So our aim was actually to compare the existing tubes on the market which are intended to be used for glucose testing. And we actually wanted to see what is their effect and whether they are producing comparable effect on the glucose preservation. We have identified 92 articles altogether that have been dealing with different tubes and tube additives, but in the end, when we excluded all papers that have not been really dealing with this topic, we ended up with 21 study. And just to make it very short, what we have been able to demonstrate is that the results of all these 21 studies have shown that citrate tubes are the most effective in preserving the glucose concentration throughout over time. So even up to 4 hours, glucose concentration is not affected if blood is sampled in the citrate tube, whereas if you use other tubes, for example the sodium fluoride tube, then the glucose preservation is not so efficient, and of course serum tubes and lithium heparin tubes are very poor in terms of glucose preservation. So these are the things that we've done in the past, and if you know, we tried to think of what should we be doing and what is really our role, and we felt in a way that we as a working group for preanalytical phase are actually the only professional entity currently in Europe responsible to take the lead in this harmonization exercise. So we believe that it is our role to catalyze the collaboration on different preanalytical issues in Europe and enhance harmonization and standardization activities in various preanalytical issues. Why do we think that? Well, because we truly believe that only through joint collaboration we can really achieve the global harmonization in Europe, and also collaboration will save the effort for many, because instead of every society doing their own guidelines and their own recommendations, why don't we sit together and do only one recommendation, and by that we will really be able to save the effort but also implement it much easier. And this is actually what we are now trying to do. Our first attempt was, or first initiative was in 2015 in the beautiful city of Porto, where we had our third EFLM-BD European Conference on Preanalytical Phase. And this is when we invited all national societies to send their representatives and to come and discuss the ways of potential collaboration. And we called this a consensus meeting, and we were quite happy to see that almost 20 out of 40 EFLM national societies have been present in Porto. We have discussed with them different opportunities and topics of mutual interest, and the outcome of this discussion is published in this paper that has been authored by Michael Corns and the rest of the working group members. And what have we learned out of this discussion? Well, we learned that there has been a rapid growth in the number of national societies with preanalytical working group in the past several years. And as Tiago said, in the past, there has not been so much interest in preanalytical phase, whereas during the last couple of years, the interest is growing. And a lot of countries in Europe now have preanalytical working groups. In 2015, in Porto, there were at least 19 countries in Europe that had a preanalytical working group. And we really believe it's fantastic. Just to show you how it really developed, how it evolved during the year, the first preanalytical working group has been established in 1995 in Germany. Then in 1998 in Spain. In 2005, a working group on preanalytical phase was formed in Italy. Then Netherlands and Croatia joined in 2012. In 2013, Austria and UK joined. And then in 2014, we had almost entire Europe covered with working groups for preanalytical phase. Almost half of Europe, we can say, had some kind of formal entity within the society that has been dealing with preanalytical issues. And this is a nice photo of the representatives of national societies which have attended the conference in Porto. We've learned that there is a lot of activities in different countries, and as you can see, for example, Spain is quite active, so they have a lot of guidelines already published or guidelines in progress or surveys. Italy is very active, Netherlands, Croatia, Serbia, Lithuania, Turkey. So there are a lot of societies doing the same things, performing surveys, developing guidelines, and we really thought that this is something we should address, and we should bring all these stakeholders together and do through joint collaboration, produce joint guidelines. At the end of the meeting actually was about achieving a consensus about two very important issues, and we are quite happy to be able to say that we have achieved a consensus about whether the harmonization is possible and necessary, and all national societies that have been present in Porto have confirmed that harmonization of preanalytical phase policies and practices is really possible and is necessary at national level in each individual country in Europe, but also at international level. And what made us even more happy is that EFLM national societies declared that they are willing to work with EFLM to harmonize preanalytical phase in Europe and to develop and implement preanalytical guidelines and recommendations. And this was for us a huge motivation to start really working towards joint EFLM guidelines. When we asked EFLM national societies what did they think were the key preanalytical issues identified which really require urgent harmonization, these 5 were identified as the 5 issues on the high priority issues in preanalytics: test ordering, so demand management, transportation and storage, patient preparation, blood sampling, and management of unsuitable specimens. And these issues were for us, we took it very seriously, and it was our strategy to really address those issues and work towards achieving harmonization and developing some recommendation documents that relate to these 5 topics. So the first project that we really did in that respect was a joint European recommendation for venous blood sampling. It is a document produced by almost 13 countries. People from 13 countries were represented and were actively collaborating on the development of these guidelines. These were not only specialists in laboratory medicine, but also representatives from nurses and representatives from phlebotomists, different professions from different countries. And this document is now has been finalized and has been sent a month ago in October to EFLM national societies with the deadline of December 10th for comments and endorsement. Just to mention the most important things that we believe make our document different from other documents. There are many recommendations, of course, and many documents, but what we believe really is so special about this document is that it is really evidence-based. So every step that we recommend, there is the evidence behind this step, which we think is really important. And besides that, our document offers guidance for successful implementation. We know that there are many guidelines, but what is really most important is how to implement the guideline. And our document there is a whole chapter that offers guidance on how to successfully implement guidelines. And not only how to implement it, but we also give you tools that may assist you in implementation. And what is really beautiful about our guidelines is that they are free and that we will translate them once they're endorsed by all national societies. They will be translated to local languages. I've also mentioned that we provide some tools and accompanying tools that we provide with the guideline, and those tools will be freely available on the EFLM website. Those tools are knowledge tests that you can use to assess the knowledge of the nurses before and after the education. You will have a checklist to be used for observational audits, so you can do a periodic audits and audit the quality of the blood sampling procedure. You have a PowerPoint presentation that gives you all the important facts that is really related to the document. So all that is in the document is also contained in the PowerPoint presentation. And we have also produced for you a short, small posters to be hanged on the walls of the blood sampling facilities. And we have also produced videos with a complete procedure on how to do the blood sampling. All right, so just when we finalized the document, the venous blood sampling recommendation, we were approached by Cola-Biocli. Cola-Biocli is a federation of societies of clinical biochemistry in Latin America, South America. And Cola-Biocli actually has requested or has expressed the desire to collaborate on this recommendation. And because of that, EFLM has decided to sign a memorandum of understanding with Colabi-Oakley, one big, just a general one, and then one specific, which is actually annex, about the collaboration of EFLM working group for preanalytical phase and Colabi-Oakley working group for preanalytical phase. And this memorandum of understanding has been signed last month in October 2017. And because of this memorandum of understanding, we are now spreading the recommendation to also countries in South America, and it will be a joint document. So we have invited Colabi-Oakley to join us in the authorship and to also distribute the document to Latin American countries and have them give us also their comments. And once this document has been revised and endorsed by EFLM and Latin American Federation, it will be a joint EFLM Colabi-Oakley recommendation for venous blood sampling. So it's really a very nice example of how can we, through collaboration and joint efforts, produce a document that can be implemented on a wider scale. For all of you who are interested in all our documents that I've presented so far, all those documents are freely accessible with the exception of the venous blood sampling guideline, because this is not accepted yet. But once it gets endorsed, it will be also freely available on the EFLM website. If you go on, if you click to Science and then go to Preanalytical phase, and then you go to Resources and Educational Material, you will get a whole list of all papers that have been published by the EFLM Working Group Preanalytical phase, and all of them are free and freely downloadable. We are, throughout the years, we have grown. We started as a quite small working group of 6-7 members, but with the years, we grew in size, and currently I think we are one of the largest, if not the largest, working groups in EFLM. We have 24 members altogether, and it has been, I have to say, although it has been an immense privilege and joy to chair this group, it has become a challenge to chair such a big working group, and then we said, well, if life gives you lemons, why don't you make lemonade? So why don't we turn this into the advantage? So we agreed to break this large working group into smaller working groups, or focus groups, how we call them, project-oriented groups, and deal with all these important issues that we have identified in Porto. So we have actually split our working group into different in various smaller groups, and those groups focused on the issues that were identified in Porto, such as the test ordering, transport and storage, which is stability, sampling, management of unsuitable specimens, and they took the work forward and continued working in smaller groups. So this is just to present you the amount of work that has been done already in these smaller groups and what are our plans in the future. So the first one, as you can see, the most important topic as identified by national societies was the test ordering, and because of that we have decided to launch a project on demand management, and this project is chaired by Mercedes Ibarz from Spain. The aim of this project is to launch a survey and to see what demand management strategies are in use in Europe. So what strategies are using different laboratories to manage the demand. Also, we will try to survey the clinicians and health managers to see what do they think, what should be the laboratory role in demand management, and how can we laboratories help them. And finally, we will try to produce opinion paper about the medical laboratory role in demand management, and we will try to offer the most efficient tools that can be used with, and we would also like to show you some examples, successful examples of how you can really manage the demand in your everyday work. The other project, so as I said, transport and storage stability was also among the top priority as a top priority issue as identified by our national societies. So we have decided also to launch a stability project, and I have the honor to chair this project under our working group. There are several different steps that we will try to achieve here. Of course, the final goal will be to build EFLM stability database. But until then, there are several minor steps that need to be dealt with. The reason for this is that if you think of stability studies, there is a lot of data already out there, but those stability studies are not done in the same way. They are not standardized. So the first step in this project will be to develop a standard for stability experiments in the clinical setting. So we will try to produce a recommendation on how to do a stability study. Then the second step will be to propose a checklist for critical appraisal of stability studies. And finally, we will screen the existing databases. There are some projects that are already well advanced, like, for example, the project done by Spanish Society. There is a project in Germany that already has a big database, and there is a project in Norway. So we will try to sit together, join the efforts, and merge all this data into one EFLM stability database. Of course, it will not be done tomorrow or next year. It's a huge project, but we will start with this first step, and this is the recommendation on how to perform stability experiments. Also, one of the top priority issues as identified by our national societies was the management of unsuitable specimens. And this is why we have launched this project. This project is chaired by Jane Kadamuro, our young member from Austria. And the aim of this project is to actually address large variations in the way that labs detect unsuitable specimens and how they manage unsuitable specimens. So we will, there are several steps here. We will try first to see how laboratories are doing this, and then we will try to come up with some recommendations as well. This project has been actually launched already 2 years ago, and we've done already some work here. So we have already 2 recommendations for you, and I'm sure they will be very, very welcomed, because at the moment there are no such recommendations at the European level. The first one is a practical recommendation on how to manage hemolyzed samples in clinical chemistry testing. And the second one is more addressing the manufacturers. It's a call for more transparency in manufacturers' declarations on serum indices. As you know, this paper is we believe is very important because it addresses manufacturers' declarations. I'm sure you all know that those declarations are quite often not complete, they're not easy to follow, they're not easy to read, they don't contain all necessary information for you to establish the system for detection and management of unsuitable specimens. And with this paper, we have actually called manufacturers to show us the data, show us the numbers, if I may say. So we have actually invited them to give us all necessary data that we need to really reliably establish the detection and management of serum indices. Both documents are submitted now to EFLM Science Committee Chair. This is in accordance with our procedures, internal procedures. All papers should be revised by the Science Committee Chair. And after his comments and endorsement, the papers will be submitted to the journal. So I hope within the next maybe month or 2, both papers will be published. Under this project on unsuitable samples, there has been also one survey already performed, and I'm sure that some of you have participated in this survey. The aim of this survey was to assess how laboratories in Europe detect and manage unsuitable samples, and this survey has been done in collaboration with EQUAL, which is the European network of EQA providers. It has been launched in September and closed. It will be closed by the end of November, so there is still time. If you haven't replied, please do so. We have so far collected more than 1,300 completed answers, and we hope with this survey to be able to understand what are the ways and what are the most critical issues in detection and management of unsuitable samples. And of course, the results will be soon published. One thing was also very high on the agenda, and this is the blood sampling. And we addressed already the blood sampling with the venous blood sampling recommendation. But what we intentionally omitted from this recommendation is the blood sampling through catheters. So our venous blood sampling recommendation is not dealing with the catheters. And we, as a working group, do not recommend blood sampling with the catheters. However, when we sat together and discussed it, we said, okay, blood sampling, we do, as a working group, do not recommend blood sampling through catheters. But we have to appreciate and we have to acknowledge the fact that blood sampling is done through catheters. So why don't we sit together, and since this is really happening in hospitals worldwide, why don't we sit together and come up with some recommendations on how, if you have to do it, if you have to do the blood sampling through catheters, how you should do it. What are the critical issues that you have to make sure to do right in order to achieve the highest quality of the sample? And this project has been led by Zorica Šumarec, and we already started. It's in the very mature phase. We have designed a questionnaire to do the observational study, and we have designed the questionnaire to do the survey as well. And once we have done the observational study and survey, we will come up with recommendations for blood sampling through catheters. The final two projects are the tube validation projects, and the last one is the campaign that we plan to do. The tube validation project is going to be done in collaboration with the tube manufacturers, and we will try to come up with a comprehensive recommendation on how can you do the analytical as well as technical validation of the tubes, and we will also come up with different tools that will make it easier for you to do the validation. For example, like checklists, Excel charts that will calculate different parameters from the tube validation, etc., etc. The last project, as I said, is led by Michael Corns, our young member from UK. It's going to be awareness raising campaign. It's in early stage, and we are still trying to figure out how can we launch such a campaign and how can we make people understand. So I hope I have been able to show you how much work we have done and how much projects we have undertaken and we are still involved in, and of course we couldn't done it but without the support and help of many individuals and organizations. So I really would like to express my special thanks to EFLM Executive Board, who is really supportive of the work we do, and gives us full support and a lot of resources. I wish to thank to national societies for being so easy to collaborate with. They're so interested and so helpful in performing surveys and providing feedback. This is very important for us. I also wish to thank to all laboratory professionals throughout Europe, to all of you who are here with me this evening listening what we have to say about harmonization and preanalytical phase. I like to thank two companies because they are it's interesting to have them in our working group. They are looking at the same things but from a very different perspective, and it's so good to, it's so complementary to discuss with them and have their input and their point of view as well. And of course, last but not the least, I wish to thank to my working group members for their hard work. It's a fantastic group of individuals. I'm blessed to have the honor to chair this fantastic working group. They are working very, very hard. This is a photo taken recently during our meeting in Munich. We worked all day, but there, as you can see, they are all very, very happy. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but they are still very, very happy and smiling and enjoying the work we do. And this is all this is only possible because we are really, really a fantastic team. If you have enjoyed this webinar and if you're interested in preanalytical phase, I promise you we will give you more. We have decided to give you 5 more webinars that will address different issues and different projects that we are dealing with. Zorica Šumarac will already in January talk about our venous blood sampling project, and she will explain in details most important aspects of our recommendation. Tiago, who is the host of the webinar this evening, will give a webinar on tube validation. Michael Corns will talk about the order of draw in May. Stephen Church will talk about the catheter collection in September. And Peter Vermeersch will give a webinar on preanalytical mysteries. For those of you who really, really like preanalytical phase, I invite you all to come to next, to 5th EFLM preanalytical phase conference, which will take place in Zagreb in March in 2019. I thank you all for your attention and participation. And I give my microphone to our moderator, Tiago.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria. There were some small problems with the slides, but I think people could follow the audio and could follow well your presentation. We already have some questions, and I would like to start with a very practical question that has been around in the chat. Is that are we going to have, although I know the answer, but I think it's important that you explain it, are we going to have the guidelines available in different languages? The question came from a Portuguese-speaking participant, but I'd like to have your answer.
Yes, this is actually, I think, the added value of our project. We are planning, because we have 24 members of the working group, all 24 members come from 24 different countries, and we plan to translate the guideline and all tools into all European languages. It will be a project and it will not be done within a month or so, but yes, this is a plan, and we will hopefully be able to, by the end of next year, have all documents in all languages on the EFLM website freely available.
Yes. Another question came from a kind of comparison with another area in terms of harmonization, and it comes from a very recent article that was published in Practical Laboratory Medicine, and on reference ranges and the need for harmonization also. And the conclusion of this article and the question on the opinion people would like to have from you is on this final conclusion of the article comes when the authors advocate that we should use method-specific reference ranges in preference to other sources, particularly where method bias and lack of standardization limits reference range transferability and harmonization. And your opinion has been asked about this. Of course, it is another area. It relates to reference ranges. But what's your opinion about this, Ana Maria?
Thank you for the question. It actually more addresses the post-analytical phase. We do have a work post-analytical phase, but I cannot agree more with the authors of the paper. Yes, if methods are not comparable, that we really need method-specific reference ranges. So I would actually say that it is now up to manufacturers. They have a big responsibility here, and we as a work are preparing a lot of papers which actually call for more action from manufacturers, because it is really up to them to achieve a certain degree of standardization or at least harmonization so that methods could be more comparable. And unless, or as long as we are using methods which are not comparable, yes, unfortunately, we do need assay-specific reference ranges. Unfortunately.
Also, Ana Maria, we have been asked, and it comes from the Middle East, it comes from Europe. The question is, how could we enforce or help the creation of groups around Preanalytical in national societies? For example, in European countries that do not have them, those Preanalytical groups, or it is not identified as an area of interest, and simultaneously, how can we spread this to other areas? And the question comes specifically from Middle East and from a specialist in Lebanon. What's your opinion about this?
Well, I think that if you want to have a working group analytical phase in a society, there has to be one enthusiastic individual who really is interested in the analytical phase. Without anyone, without this kind of individual, there will be no phase. So I think it's up to somebody within the society who really thinks it's a fantastic topic, and then this person should maybe initiate the formation of a working group, and then different societies can maybe join. I believe that if we are talking about Arab societies, I believe that there is an Arab Federation, and if Arab Federation is interested to collaborate with the EFLM, they are more than welcome, because we, as I explained to you and as I showed, we are already collaborating with the Colabiocli. So Latin American countries have already joined us, and I really think that we live in the global world, so we don't need recommendations which are only for Europe. I think we need to start to think really globally, and if we agree on some common document, I really would love to see this document be used worldwide. So why don't we collaborate with other regions as well? If Arab Federation is interested in collaboration, please do get in touch with me, and we will try to find out the way to collaborate and produce some joint documents. I think this is really what we should be doing. We should be collaborating around the globe, because laboratory medicine should be same around the globe. We should be all using same methods, same recommendations, same set of standards.
Ana Maria, we have now a different, it relates of course to this harmonization, a different question, and the topic is that how can we set some differences? Because, for example, in Brazil, and the question comes from there, people are now trying to minimize fasting time for most analyses and try to have it shortened. How can we in a certain way, how can we have this and play according to the proposed guidelines and fasting 12 hours fasting? Sorry, how can we have all this conciliated in a way that allow local practices or sometimes regulations to conciliate that with the EFLM proposals for guidelines?
Yeah, well, I think the answer is very, very simple. And I'd like to go back to my early slides in my presentation. If you want the same result from example, if you want a comparable result, then we need to make sure that all pre-analytical procedures are standardized. And when I say standardized, I actually mean that we do it in the very same way all around the globe. If we don't do it, if for example, I take the blood for glucose and leave it for 3 hours, and you in Brazil take the blood for glucose and test it within half an hour, will we get the same result? No. Why? Because we did not standardize the pre-analytical procedures for glucose testing. So if we if we want really comparable results, and we have to have comparable results, we have to standardize all pre-analytical procedures. So we have to agree on something that we as a profession think is important, should be recommended, should be a standard, and then all of us should comply with this standard. Otherwise, we will not achieve standardization. And mind you, we are all using same guidelines. We are using guidelines to test diabetes, to test chronic kidney disease, to test sepsis, to measure lactate concentration, etc., etc. How can we measure all these important parameters and believe that our results are comparable, that we can all use same cutoffs in these guidelines if our pre-analytical procedures are not standardized? I don't think that we are aware enough of the importance of the standardization of pre-analytical phase. So to go back to your questions, I don't think that Brazil should be an exception. And I don't think that any other country should be exception. We have to agree on one set of standards, and then we should all apply to this standard. We can discuss whether this standard is good or not, and if we think that there should be a different way of defining it, we may sit together and define a different standard. But as long as we have one common definition of the fasting state, I think we should all be implementing the same definition. Otherwise, we will get results which are different, not because they are really different in people, but because the pre-analytical procedures are made it different. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. And another question that is arriving is people would like to know how to participate in surveys and how to participate not only inside the FLM societies, but also people are asking it from outside Europe and from outside EFLM societies. How can people participate in different surveys or works or some of these projects that you also announced?
Well, for people from Europe, I recommend that all of you register to EFLM newsletter. EFLM newsletter is a communication channel with EFLM national societies, and we this is the way we send all invitations to all surveys that we perform. For people who are outside Europe, I think that the best way would be to achieve collaboration at the level of federation. So, as we are the European Federation, we cannot collaborate with individuals and individual national societies. But as I already suggested to Arab societies, I think that the best way is the kind of collaboration that we have just achieved with Latin American countries. I think that those national societies should, within their federation, initiate the collaboration with EFLM, and then we may work together. We can delegate, for example, we have a delegate from Latin American Federation, Gabriel Lima Oliveira, and I've seen his name somewhere on the list of participants. Gabriel is a member of our society. He's a representative member from the Latin American societies. So I think this is really the way we should be doing. So maybe other federations can also delegate their members, and we can all work together and try to achieve common standards and common recommendations.
Yes, Ana Maria, do you think it also appeared as a question that we can standardize even more, and even in terms of the tube validation and the work to improve collection tubes and collection systems? Do you think that in the future we can go in that direction and improve even more the quality of the material that we have for venous collection or for blood collection?
Well, this is a question more for manufacturers, but I'm I'm aware of a lot of research and development that is going on in different IVD companies, and I know that the quality of their materials is continuously improving. So I'm sure, you know, in time that will come, we will have better tubes and tubes which will be um, which will be which will make possible, which will enable us to collect higher quality of the samples. However, we have to be also aware of the fact that there are some manufacturers which are so-called low-cost manufacturers, and they are competing with the big ones. We all have tenders in our countries, in our laboratories, and those low-cost tube manufacturers are much less expensive, and to be able to defend ourselves from the products which are not of acceptable quality, I think we need to have some mechanisms, and one of the mechanisms is, of course, again our paper on tube validation. I think that we should somehow incorporate this mechanism into the tendering procedure and have a validation in place always when you purchase a new tube. I think we should do tube validation, and if results of a tube validation turn out to be non-satisfactory, then we have the evidence for this tube not to accept this tube and to purchase the more expensive tube. So I think that the contribution from our side is this document on tube validation, the first one that we have already produced, and the other one that we will produce in the future under the project group led by Edmund van Dongen. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, yes, yes. Do you think, Ana Maria, that there should be some system that would enforce the proper use or the proper implementation of these guidelines? Do you think that this, for example, could be part of quality systems, and through it we get more and get deeper interest and application of these guidelines?
It's a very good point, and this is our final. This is going to be our final goal. I think that accreditation agencies should endorse our standards and recommendations, and recognize their importance, and during auditing and during assessment, they should check whether this implementation, this recommendation has been implemented. So this is our final goal, and yes, EFLM has representatives in various ISO and other European standard writing bodies. So we will try, once this EFLM recommendation has been finally published, we will try to somehow implement it into the procedure. And this is also for us first example of the EFLM recommendation, because EFLM so far has not published official EFLM recommendations. So this is for us also going to be the first one, and with this one we will actually pilot the procedure and see how we can achieve the better recognition of this recommendation.
And this may be a question from me. Do you think that these recommendations should also enforce, for example, the type or the quality of the professional that is engaged in the different tasks, in order to harmonize things? Shouldn't we have also definition of the minimum skills that all professionals that are engaged in this pre-analytical phase should have?
You touch now a very sensitive issue. It's highly political, as if I may say. Yes, I think that we should define a certain degree of competence and knowledge and skills. We did try with this venous blood sampling recommendation, we did try to define some mechanism of ensuring that the individuals who are involved in the blood sampling procedures are educated and competent to do so. And you will see when you read this document, you will see that we suggest that there is a continuous mechanism of education for all existing members of the staff and also for all new members of the staff, and that there is also a periodic assessment of their knowledge, but not only theoretical knowledge but also practical skills by auditing, by periodic auditing. And this is why we have provided a checklist to do the audit. And if you, for example, observe that one healthcare individual is not skilled enough or does not have enough knowledge to do the blood sampling, then we recommend that this person goes again to take the educational intervention in the form of a webinar or a lecture, and takes the knowledge test to improve the knowledge. And we also recommend for every healthcare institution to establish a kind of certification for individuals involved in blood sampling, and this certification should last for example, 2 years. And after these 2 years, you should again take the test and be audited in order to make sure that you still have the knowledge and skills to do that, to do the blood sampling. And whether this should be done at the level of the hospital or maybe even preferably at the level of the national society, it remains to be defined. I personally believe that every national society or every country should arrange it at the government level or at some higher level, so that it's easily transposed to all healthcare institutions in that country. But of course, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be done quickly or soon. We recommend that maybe one hospital does it as a pilot, and then when in one hospital you develop a successful model, then maybe other hospitals can follow that model and hopefully do the same.
Ana Maria, we are over 1 hour now. Our webinar is coming to the end. I don't know if you have anything else that you think could be interesting for our participants.
No, thank you. I just want to thank to everybody. It has been a pleasure for me to be your guest this evening, and it's very nice to see so many people still with us and writing questions, and congratulations. So thank you all, and I hope to see you somewhere soon again.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria. From my point of view, of course, very biased. It was very interesting. Lots of people engaged with the questions and comments, and I think this was very important for the setting of a pre-analytical era in these webinars. Thank you very much for all participants for the interest, and thank you very much, Daniel, also for all the support that you gave to this webinar. And from Porto, bye bye, good evening for all you.